Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Mr. Josh bringing you another update of our experiment we performed a few weeks ago. This experiment, if you remember, was looking at how important it is to keep your hands clean to prevent the spread of germs. To perform this experiment, we changed one variable, or thing, for each piece of bread. The variable was what the bread touched. Everything else in our experiment stayed the same. Looking back to last week's recap, we saw mold growing on only one piece of bread, the bread that was rubbed all over the trash can lid. All the other pieces of bread were mold-free. Let's see what has happened after 3 weeks. This first piece of bread was pulled out of the bread bag with a pair of clean tongs. It was placed directly into our Ziploc bag using those tongs. Let's see what has happened after another week. This bread looks just as fresh as when I pulled it out of the bread bag 3 weeks ago. There's a change from last week, though. When I press down gently on the Ziploc bag, the bread feels stale. It doesn't feel fluffy like a new slice of bread does. I don't see any mold growth on this slice of bread. This second piece of bread was pulled out of the bread bag with a pair of clean tongs. It was placed into my youngest son's hands. He then used both hands to pat both sides of the bread slice, and then he placed it into the Ziploc bag. Let's check out what has happened after another week. This bread also looks just as fresh as when I pulled it out of the bread bag 3 weeks ago. The slice feels much softer than the first piece of bread when I gently press down on it. That's very interesting. I also don't see any mold growth on this slice of bread. This third piece of bread was pulled out of the bread bag with a clean pair of tongs. My youngest son washed his hands for 20 seconds using soap and warm water. He then used both hands to pat both sides of the bread slice, and then he placed it into the Ziploc bag. Let's see what has happened to this slice of bread after another week in the bag. This bread also looks just as fresh as when I pulled it out of the bread bag 3 weeks ago. This slice of bread also feels soft and fluffy. After careful observations, I don't see any mold growth. This fourth piece of bread was pulled out of the bread bag with a pair of clean tongs. I used hand sanitizer on my hands right before I touched the bread slice. I used both hands to pat both sides of the bread. Let's see what has happened after another week. This piece of bread looks just like the last 3 pieces. I don't see any mold growth anywhere on this piece of bread. The bread also feels very soft, much like the last 2 pieces I've touched. This fifth piece of bread was pulled out of the bread bag with a clean pair of tongs. Not sure why I did that. I then rubbed the bread on a trash can lid. Why pull it out with a clean pair of tongs when you're just going to throw it on a trash can lid? Now, the experiment wanted us to place the bread on a table, but I didn't think our table was going to be dirty enough. I wanted something that I knew would have germs. So trash can lid it was. Oh, I'm excited about this piece. Let's see what has happened after 3 weeks of sitting in the Ziploc bag. We have mold. There are several dark spots of a darker brown mold. There are also some smaller blue-gray spots around the crust area. This mold looks almost fuzzy. The front of the bread has more mold than the back. I can also see mold along the crust of the bread. When I push gently on the moldy parts of the bread, it feels stiffer than the other slices of bread. When I press on the parts of the bread that look to be mold-free, the bread is much softer. Now, this is not a piece of bread I want on my sandwich. Overall, we can see we have one piece of bread with mold growing on it after 3 weeks. What does that tell us as a scientist? That germs move from surface to surface. Your hands are surface, and they have germs all over them. That is why it is important to wash your hands with soap and water regularly. That's it for now. Until next time, stay strong, stay safe, and stay learning.